So just a couple days ago, it's actually beginning of September now, but a couple days ago, we saw the Canada geese flying south already. So we think it's gonna be a pretty early winter, which is good, but it's also a shame because we are planning to get quite a bit of work done outdoors, but a little bit harder when it gets really cold and really snowy. But we came out this morning because the pollinator garden looks great in early morning light, but we have some clouds now too. But I wanted to show you just the updates on the pollinator garden. It was really hard to imagine that it could be this robust, especially because in early May, I believe that's when we were out here last, it was very close to the ground. I mean, the phlox were blooming. There's some phlox actually still blooming down here. Here, I'll show you. It's surprising how some of them will actually put out some flowers later in the season. Right here, those little white flowers down here with little pink centers. I was surprised to actually see that in flower again. The thyme has really started to spread. So has some of the clover that I haven't planted that just kind of moved in here. One of the plants that I have fallen in love with, and I actually ended up getting some more, is this Liatris microcephala. So microcephala means small head, and that's referring to these flowers right here because they're quite small. So if you're familiar with some Liatris, here I'll show you this one over here. I actually have many different species of Liatris, and they seem to bloom at all different times, which is very nice to have them across the seasons. So here's another one. I can't remember what species this one is. And then you have one that's over here that surprisingly is way past its bloom, which is funny because when I got this is a cultivar, this isn't a straight species, this is kobold. And when I got this was one of the first things I planted with this eutrochium and with this turtle head. This one was blooming at the same time, but this year it bloomed very early and it was done. So I was shocked by that. I think it just goes to show you that sometimes if you have like cultivars, they don't always like maybe sync up with their appropriate pollinators. So it's also good to actually get some of the straight species that are regionally from your area so that they can provide a pollinator source sometimes for those specialist pollinators that come out. And speaking of specialist pollinators, I've actually been tweaking this garden some. Of course, I've been tweaking it because this is 2 months away from being 1 year old. You could see that it's pretty robust already. In May, it didn't look like this, but I've been interplanting now here and again in some of the gaps so that none of the weeds start to move in. But I've started to add more yellow flowers, and so has our resident chipmunk because he's been planting sunflower seeds. This one's about to bloom. He's been planting sunflower seeds, you can see some over there, all throughout the garden. So I enjoy having a community garden with the animals here, so I'll let him do his thing. Some folks have been chopping off the heads of the sunflowers, so eating off the heads of the sunflower. You can see one all the way down there by the coreopsis. It's decapitated. And I think that is on account of our groundhog eating the heads off the sunflowers. So I'm hoping they get tall enough so that, you know, they might be able to reach the leaves, but they can't reach the head. And then we'll actually have some sunflowers throughout fall and winter, which will be great for the songbirds. what I've been doing with this garden on specialist pollinators is that I've been learning a lot more about specialist bees and specialist pollinators. And really what I mean by that is that these are pollinators that rely on the pollen sources of a specific family, genus, or even species of plant. So they co-evolved with these plants. And there was a recent report out in New York called the Empire Native Pollinator Report. And it just has showcased how much our specialist pollinators have declined. And that's due to, one, habitat loss, and also just eliminating those pollen sources that I was mentioning. Now, you might see pollinators come out like certain butterflies or moths, and they'll land on any flower. And those are more like generalist pollinators, and they're sometimes there for the nectar. But the pollen is what has all that protein. That's what they use in order to be able to raise their broods. So that's how I've been tweaking not only my pollinator garden, but other gardens here. Because as I was doing an inventory of the plants that I've been growing here, I realized that I have over 81% of the plants are specialist pollinator plants. So I was like, okay, well, I won't get to 100% this year, but let's try for that. Let's aim for that. And let's, get some of those plants in number. So, that's why I added some of these Helianthus, which is also a specialist pollinator plant as well. And there's a few others that I've added through here, but like this Grenadilla, it's called gum plant. These are really small right now because I just bought them as like little plugs. But next year, hopefully they will be more robust. So I think what you might be seeing here is not everything in bloom, because this is it's not a year old yet. I think in 2 to 3 years, it's gonna be far more robust. Something else that I'm really excited about, it's just starting to put out its inflorescence. I love this grass. This is called Muhlenbergia capillaris. It's very hard to see it right now, but this will start to put out an inflorescence, and it'll get like so airy and so beautiful, so that when the light comes through, and the light is not coming through this morning, but when the light comes through, it'll almost look as if it's just like a gauzy haze. And so when you look through the garden, you could see through it, but it'll be kind of this purple haze that you're looking at the flowers in the distance, which will be very nice. But you can see the Echinacea purpurea is pretty much getting past their bloom. So they're looking a bit tattered. And then these are some penstemons here. We just had a bumblebee visiting them. And these are much low growing penstemons compared to, some of our native penstemons. And this is a Phlox paniculata. This has been in bloom for a little while, but it's getting past its bloom. It's been a really great pollinator plant here for us. Typically when the sun is full on, that's when you start to see the pollinators come out. It's still a little chilly in the morning. And like I said, you could feel that like the autumn is coming on. Now this area, I have not planted a lot, and you could see you have a lot more weeds in this area. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, the main reason is that if we run an electrical line from here, we're gonna have to take up this part of the garden. So the only thing that I planted was basically this Andropogon Girardii, which is I think it's called Black Hawk, or I can't remember the cultivar name, but it gets a nice purplish red color. And then I have some lupin here, some lupinus. Here's some heads that have been decapitated of chippy sunflowers. And then this is Agastaki, and they have so many different colors of this, and I find it to be a very beautiful plant. Smells great, and also the pollinators love it. We have quite a bit of cultivars in here. I'll try to point them out, and you can see that they vary in color. This was just a couple stems when I first planted this. You probably could recognize it from its seed pods or the milkweed bugs that are on it. They're still mating so late in the season. This is an Asclepias incarnata. So this is like a swamp milkweed. Got much thinner leaves. And I was really excited to see that we had 3 monarch butterfly caterpillars that were on this eating it. So that was doing its job. Now this is looking a little bedraggled. I planted a bunch of kalmia. This is our native kalmia or mountain laurel. I think it gets way too much sun here because the one that I planted under deep shade looks so much healthier. So ideally, we would plant around this to kind of shade it out a bit more, but because we left this open, it's not getting quite a bit of shade. So we'll have to kind of leave it like that because it doesn't really like to be transplanted, kalmia. So I might leave it there, I might have to take it out, we'll see. These are I think this is a rain lily that is still kind of hanging around, which is neat. It's a bulb plant. And then here's some other agastache. You could see, again, just the riot of color here. It's got coral with these raspberry throats and a much bluer green leaf. And this will spread, and that's the kind of idea, is to just not have much barren earth here, but to have these plants spread out. And then hopefully I could then divide some of these plants, and this will be a nice place for me to divide plants and maybe put them in the meadow. So one of the things that you'll notice about this pollinator garden is I do want to keep this pathway relatively free and not have it too overgrown. So aside from the sunflowers that our chipmunk planted, I've tried to keep the plants a bit more low growing here. So you'll see that you'll have a lot of the elfin creeping thyme. Need to remove a lot of these grasses that kind of come and move in. And then you'll see that we have quite a bit of succulents here. And then lower growing plants like that armeria. Some over there that are still in bloom, the scabiosa. You have the oreganum, which is the ornamental oregano. And then you start getting slightly taller. This is a beautiful cultivar of Coreopsis lanceolata. So I've tried to go with these like soft pink coral cerise colors in this garden with some brighter riotous pinks and some deep red velvet purples. But then also I started to say, okay, well, those whites and those yellows really punctuate it very nicely. This is not a native verbena, but wow, it attracts so many pollinators, from butterflies to our hummingbirds. This is Verbena bonariensis. And then we have our native Vernonia over there, which is our ironweed, that other purple. So we have quite a bit. And then we have our potentillas here. These are like shrubby cinquefoils. And these were eaten down actually by somebody, maybe the spongy moths. But and then our rose is going through some stuff because I think it's either a chipmunk or a vole or something has burrowed down there, and I've tried to cover it up multiple times, but they keep on kicking it back out. So I'm like, okay, you could have your hole. This is the only thing that has been, I think, misguidedly planted. This is a dahlia. And I thought it was going to be pink, but I guess it didn't turn out to be that way. So I probably misplanted it here. It could have been better in another garden. This garden has provided some real interest, I think, you know, for this area, for those of you who are tuning in and seeing this just now. I mean, this was a process. I mean, this didn't exist before. It was just lawn. So I'm very pleased how this has turned out. It now has increased to about 257 different plants in here, so species or varieties of plants. And I'm just so pleased being able to look out of the windows in the morning to see this, to see all the birds and the insects interacting with this. And I think it'll only get more diverse as the seasons unfold, as we start to see all of the plants emerge throughout the seasons, and also to figure out what other plants that need to be planted in here for specialist pollinators. And that will definitely be an episode that we'll cover in the future on specialist pollinators, because I really highly encourage people who have gardens to plant for the wildlife, to plant for the insects. Sometimes we plant gardens with the idea that we don't even want nature around us. And so I think that planting the garden to attract that nature, to attract that wildlife around us, will only bring in a lot more joy for us. And look, the light is starting to come out right now, so it's starting to dazzle up the garden. Pycnanthemum, this is a plant that will spread quite quickly, and I have this also in the herb garden, and I've planted this in the orchard, planted this in the meadow. And again, this might be something that I'm gonna have to cut back quite a bit, but again, it's such a good pollinator plant. It's a little, again, past its bloom, but you'll see some small flies. And again, that's right, flies are pollinators too. You have beetles who are pollinators, you have ants that are pollinators, so butterflies, moths, you have lots of different types of things other than just bees. Yeah, this is it. This is a nice update on the pollinator garden tour. We hoped you enjoyed the tour through our pollinator garden. And if you enjoy tranquil garden tours like this, let us know in the comments below. And if you are enjoying the films that we produce, consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notifications bell. That will let you know when new episodes release. We commit 10% of our Google AdSense proceeds to community projects in the Finger Lakes area, so your support does go a long way. Have a blessed day, and we'll see you in the next episode.